Welcome everyone. My name is Nikos, aka Sephir, and this is Out of the Box, EDH. In today's video of deck building tips, we will talk about lands. We will answer questions regarding how to build or improve the land base of a casual bracket 2 or 3 EDH deck. More specifically, how many lands you should run in your decks, how many basics your deck needs, and finally, how many lands that enter tapped you should have. Of course, there are many variables involved, but we can certainly make a case for the vast majority of brackets 2 and 3 decks out there. So, question 1. How many lands should I run? This is very dependent on one other important parameter: the number of ramp you run. In general, the less ramp you run, the more lands you need, because hitting your land drops becomes even more essential to play the game. If you want to have both enough lands and at least one mana ramp option by turn 2 or 3, as most decks should aim for, the magic numbers are 46 to 49, which is the accumulated number of your lands and mana ramp in your deck, give or take. These are the numbers needed to be able to have both land drops in early turns and ramp at a chance around 80%, which is a really good chance. These numbers can be reduced to 43 to 45 if your commander can come in early and has the ability to ramp on its own, or even to 38 to 42 if you run literally zero ramp for some reason, or increased up to 50 to 54 if your game plan evolves around abusing lands in general, or you plan to play with lots of mana dorks that come in at turn 1. Now, how many of that numbers should be lands and how many should be ramp? This is up to you, but I personally prefer to dedicate at least 10 to 12 cards for early ramp in the vast majority of my decks. Question 2. How many basics decks need? Is there even a reason to run basics if we have many non-basic lands that produce the same colors of mana? The answer to the latter one is yes. You always need an amount of basics, even a small one. Of course, the more colors your deck have, the less basics it will be able to run. You need to keep space for all the non-basics that give multiple color options. But you should always run at least a small amount of them in your deck. Cards like Path to Exile or Field of Ruin are extremely common. You want at least to get something out of them. And there are hundreds other random effects your opponents might run that can make you search for a basic. You don't want to miss those. Furthermore, basics are like a safe zone. They don't get targeted or destroyed that easily. As for the actual number of basics a deck can run, this is where things start to get a bit more complicated. It depends on some very specific factors. A. How many colors does the deck have? As said before, the less colors a deck has, the more basics it will run. And B. How many basic land searchers we expect the deck to play. Now, by basic land searchers, I mean specifically basic land searchers. For example, a Farseek is not a basic land searcher specifically, since it can also bring a Shockland, a Surveillant, or whatever. A Steve, on the other hand, is a basic land searcher, since it can bring only basic lands. To no one's surprise, most such effects are either green or, to some lesser extent, white. Of course, the more such searchers, by the way, I prefer the term searchers than tutors. Tutors bring other things in mind. The more such searchers you expect to play, the more basics you should have in your deck, since you don't want them to become dead cards. Now, there is a small table I made that represents, in my experience, what numbers of basic lands a deck should run based on those parameters. And depending on what deck tries to do, you can move the number to the lower or higher scale of its respective category. Question 3. How many lands that enter tapped should I have in the deck? This depends on the turn you want to make your impactful plays. Unless you play a 1 CMC commander or a very aggro strategy or a deck with mana dorks, most people are happy to start the game with just a tapped land, to follow up with a ramp option on turn 2 and a 3 or 4 mana play on turn 3. This play pattern demands that you should be able to play untapped lands on turns 2 and 3. This is also backed up by the majority of mana curves that is advised for a deck to have, aka a peak on 2 and 3 CMC spells with a small decline on 4 CMC ones. After those early turns, it becomes less significant to play untapped lands, since you will have already both mana to play your game and other engines in play. According to math, for having more than 90% chance to draw one or less lands that enter tapped in the first 3 turns, we will have to run at most 5 such lands in our deck. I would personally be willing to go up to 7 to an 85% in most of my bracket 2 decks. After that number, the chances of having multiple lands that enter tapped in our early turns skyrocket. However, if you are playing a deck that you are not interested in early plays, let's say a heavy control deck, or even a deck with Keruga as a companion, tapped lands make zero difference. In such a case, there is no limit in the percentage of lands that enter tapped that you can play, go as you please. If, on the other hand, your deck's game plan is to make turn 1 plays, then the number for having a respectable chance, let's say 85%, to not have a land that enters tapped in your opening hand or your first draw is just 2. There is a reason nobody uses lands that enter tapped in EDH. Here are all the tables together. I believe they can be of great use for anyone wanting to either build a new deck or improve the land base of existing ones. And that concludes my general land base guide for EDH. I hope you liked it, and if you do, consider joining my Discord community for free, where all EDH related stuff are discussed. See you around! Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.